All right, folks, welcome back to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. And today I'm here with Kalyani Pardeshi. Kalyani, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, David?
I'm wonderful today. So before we started recording, you said you're a little bit tired from the week, right? You feeling hyped up right now? You good?
Yes, I am. Your energy just is awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit tired too, so it's okay. It's okay. But I've had a couple of these. It's coffee, really. Honestly, it's coffee. But let's get started. So, Kanye, I don't want to take the glory away from you. How about you introduce yourself to everyone?
Okay, so hi everyone. I am Kalyani Pardeshi. I am the only certified Flowcess trainer in Canada. What that means is I help you get into flow intentionally. And I can share so many stories about that throughout our conversation. What I do is I help people stop bullying themselves by discovering their uniqueness and mastering their thought processes. And I've worked with the Calgary Military Families Resource Center. I took them through my 6-week self-bullying course. I've worked with parents and teens, groups of them. I did a TEDx talk in May this year. And I also worked with inclusive leadership in a virtual world where I talked about self-bullying disguised in seemingly positive messages. So I played around with people's brains and it was a lot of fun.
I want to dive into that right away, if that's okay.
Sure.
Self-bullying. It's the first time I've heard that term when I met you. When one of our mutual acquaintances introduced us. Actually, it's Richard Lee Tai, episode number 12 on my podcast. He introduced us, and one of the things that was interesting listening to your TEDx talk was talking about self-bullying and how even cultural influences come into that. But maybe talk a little bit about self-bullying, what that is, and what's been your experience with that.
Okay, so a lot of people think self-bullying is the same thing as being hard on yourself. You know, your inner critic, the voice that's bullying you. No, it's not. Because the difference is, and I talk about conscious versus unconscious brain, self-bullying behaviors are unconscious behaviors. It takes place in 90% of our brain. And the reason we're not aware of it is because they come across as being motivational behaviors. So the ones I talked about in my TEDx talk is being an overachiever, a goal chaser, a goal digger is the word that I used. Being an underdog. These are people we look up to, someone who is toxically positive, and the word toxic, but I used Pollyanna, right? Is like we look at these people and think, wow, I just want to be like them. But we spoke about this as cause versus effect, right? So yes, you can be an overachiever, but what's the cause of it? Are you doing it for the cause or for the effect? The effect is, yes, you want to get all these degrees, you're finding your worth and value in what you're achieving versus who you are. And the cause of wanting to do it is like, you know what? I want to learn this. This is something interesting, so I want to learn this. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it for the cause versus effect, one of the wonderful examples I love to give is my brother is a highly successful CPA in the US. But the reason he chose to become a CPA was for the effect, not for the cause. Because when he was in high school, he went to visit a friend of his, and this friend had a beautiful home, you know, the best of everything in the house,
Mm-hmm.
cars, everything, furniture, you name it, the best of everything. And he asked his friend, so what does your dad do? And he said, well, my dad's a CPA. So my brother's like, I want to do that because I want to have all these things. And the question I always ask is, well, once you've done all of that, are you happy? And the answer is no, they're not. Because when you're doing it from a growth mindset perspective, when you're doing it for the cause of it, you will find happiness regardless of the outcome, regardless of whether you achieve it or not, because you took the action. You're happy in just taking the action.
Hmm. So I think this is actually a good conversation because how many first year students in coming out of high school will put up their hand and say, I want to be a doctor. I remember in my first year biology class, it was over 1,000 people in the lecture hall, and 90% of the room put up their hand. So that was like 900 people. The teacher said, "Okay, the reality is less than 1% of you in this room, basically 10 of you, are going to become a doctor," and that trashed everyone's dreams. But I do wonder then, why do they want to become a doctor? Is it for the cause? They want to truly help people? Or is it the effect?
They
How,
are the only ones can actually answer that, right?
uh-huh.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I
No, keep
apologize.
going.
For me, I was in it for the effect, and I mentioned this in my TEDx, is that my family had a long list of nicknames for me, and one of them was dumb. But what no one considered is I was put into grade 1 at age 5, which
Mm,
was a year too soon for my brain to have developed that much, for me to understand concepts like skip counting, which I didn't know. And, I didn't do very well in grade 1. I passed the grade, but then in grade 2, I worked really, really hard and I was ranked first, and I was made fun of then too. It's like, okay, were you the only kid in the class? Or what went wrong? Right?
uh-huh.
So for me, the self-bullying behavior came in because I wanted to stop people from teasing me and my own family from teasing me. So a lot of it is, are you a doctor? Are you a this? Are you a that? It's very interesting. I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and she was saying to me that her niece is, studying PhD in cancer research, but she's got such an attitude about her. And that's the thing, is like, when we talk about humility, it is the ability to see the perspective of another.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about being less than. It's about to be humble enough that you're able to take someone else's perspective and say, okay, maybe I'm wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing, is that we've always, and in my culture particularly, we've always associated your worth and your value with what you do, what you have, not who you are. And that was the point of my TEDx talk, is like, I'm not what I do. I'm not what I have. I'm not my career. I'm not my behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I?
So who am I? And I want to get to that in a few moments, about knowing who you are and knowing what your cause is and not just the effect. But I before that, so you talk about all the external bullying that happens. It could be from family, friends. It doesn't matter. There is the desire to want something because of the effect. Cars, house. Let's talk about the self-bullying, because that's the theme of what you talk about. What are some of the self-bullying behaviors you've experienced for yourself and other people express?
So one of my favorite ones I like to talk about is being the underdog, where every single time someone said I couldn't do something, I'd embark on a mission to prove them wrong. It was as simple as that. It was like I really wanted to prove them wrong. And that's how I ended up losing something like 22 pounds working out at home, simply because somebody said to me, well, you can't lose it. You can't get back to your pre-pregnancy weight. And I did it because I just wanted to shut them up. So there are a lot of people that I know. In fact, I was talking to a fellow speaker at the dinner before the actual event, and I asked him a question. I said to him, I'm going to make a statement, and I want you to tell me, do you find this motivating, or do you find this is bullying? And it's something Frank Sinatra said. And he said, the best form of revenge is extreme success.
Hmm.
So my whole point is, you're pursuing extreme success with the cause, the intention of getting revenge.
Hmm.
How is that healthy?
Hmm.
How
That's
is that healthy?
self-bullying. Is that
It is.
self-bullying?
It is.
Hmm. And so then what's the impact of, like you gave the example of, like, someone said, hey, you can't lose enough weight. And I think in your TED talk, you said you lost 22 pounds. You also went into a bodybuilding competition.
I was invited. I didn't go in because I just
Okay.
did not have 6 hours to train every single day.
But I guess, what are some of the things you're saying to yourself in that process that, makes it even worse?
Well, I used to always just say, I'm going to show them. I'm going to
Mm.
shut them up. But you know what's very interesting is they don't care. They've said whatever they've wanted to say and they've moved on, right? In fact, when I lost all the weight, the very same person just said to me, well, you don't look pretty anymore. Your face has lost all its charm because you've gone so skinny. You look sick. So it just kind of like backfired on me, right? I mean, I was featured in magazines. None of that mattered. But now in hindsight, I realize people say these things because they have low self-esteem. And self-esteem is confidence in your uniqueness. If you're confident in who you are, you don't feel the need to put someone else down.
Okay. So, given that, you talked about knowing who you are. How do you help people know who they are?
So I'm going to go a little bit into the backstory here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about a story. Let's say you and I walk into a dealership, okay, on the same day, and you and I buy the exact same car, same make, same model, same color, everything. 2 years from now, is your car going to look exactly like mine?
The way I take care of things, maybe not.
Exactly. So, and maybe the way I take care of things, maybe not. And why is that? Is it the car's fault or how we drive it?
It's how we drive it. It's how we
It's how we
maintain
drive
it.
it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. And talking about who you are, the driver is your uniqueness, your intangible drivers or your intrinsic motivators. The car is your brain. So if you're not driving your car, your brain, according to your uniqueness, you're going to burn yourself out. And I did that. I did that for 2 years. I operated outside of my uniqueness and I was burnt out. Where I was not driven by what intrinsically motivates me to be.
So how do you find that then? How do you find what's intrinsic to you?
There's a little quiz. So it's the
I think we're
intangible
going to go.
quiz. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the fun part of this podcast, folks.
So it's literally a 3-question quiz. And they present a situation, and in that situation, it's how you answer the questions, how you approach the situation that determines what intrinsically motivates you to do what you want to do. Now, the difference between the intangible driver test and a personality test is a personality test teaches you how not to lose energy. Okay. Intangible drivers teach you how to gain energy regardless of the context. So according to personality test, I am an introvert. I'm not supposed to interact with people. And if that were really true, I wouldn't have stood in front of between 300 and 500 people and spoken. But intangible drivers teaches me how to interact with people so that I give them energy and I gain energy at the same time.
Give energy and gain energy at the same time. Okay. Do you want to walk through that process?
Absolutely. So can I talk about yours? And I'll talk about mine.
Okay. So for context, folks, Kalyani asked me to answer these Flowcess questions. I did that before this podcast. And it came up with some output about,
Giver, server.
Yeah. My why and my how. So yeah, help me decode what this is.
Okay. So you came out as giver server. Very interestingly, my mom is server giver, the opposite, right?
Okay. So my why,
your why.
So my why in life is I'm a giver, and my how in life is I'm a server.
Correct.
So okay, we'll start there.
Okay. So your motivation, your why, your intention, regardless of any context, is to supply a tangible need or improvement. I'm guessing this is why you do podcasts, because you're getting people in, sharing ideas that can help people improve their lives. Yes? One of the things that you do.
Yeah.
Correct?
One of the major reasons.
So your focus is in the present moment. Your intention focuses in the present moment. The method, the way you use is you do something or you give something. Okay? So you're focused on others. Some people might say that you come across as unemotional because you're in the present moment and then you move on, right? You are not settled until the other person that you're giving to receives it.
Hmm.
So how people can help you feel settled, even if they don't agree with you. And I'll give you a very good story for this.
Mhm.
Even if they don't agree with you, the best way for them to make you feel settled is to start with okay,
Mhm.
because you're not saying something negative right away. You can say okay, and this is what I feel. But the
Mhm.
first word should always be okay. I accept what you're saying. Okay. Um, so on the positive side of the scale, you come across as stoic. On the negative or misunderstood style, you come across as a taker. So famous givers are Mother Teresa. Okay. Now, I'm going to share a quick story with you. My mom is the other. She's server giver.
Mhm.
And she gets really frustrated very easily. And I was at her house a couple of years ago, and I took out a stainless steel plate because she did not have um, a chopping board. And I decided to chop onions on it. I ended up scratching her stainless steel plate.
Mhm.
And she just lost it. She got so mad at me, and she went on this whole rant of, when I die and my property is divided, you make sure your brother doesn't get this scratch plate, and you take this scratch plate. To all of this, I just said, okay. And she settled right away. Right away.
Mhm.
End of conversation. We moved on. So to understand a person's uniqueness, to speak to them in their uniqueness settles them. The flip side of it is if you don't speak to someone in their uniqueness, you're abusing them.
Mhm.
Okay, so you're server how, I'm also server how. Fun fact, half the world is server how.
Mhm.
What we do as server hows is that we want to fill a need. We will do whatever it takes to fill the need. We're focused on the future, we do and we serve. Now, server how is likable and popular because they're adaptable. They meet people where they are at because we're adaptable to other people's hows. And we are not settled until the need is filled. So let someone, they have to let us fill the need, right? Um, server how on the positive sides, we're adaptable, and negative is people call us fake.
Mhm.
So, famous, server hows is like Bill Gates, Thomas Edison, right? Now, one of the stories I would love to share with you is my son, because my son's server. So he's why and how server. So he has 49 different ways in which he will approach a problem. And in school, his teachers will always tell him what to do. Fun fact about server how is that when you tell them what to do, you're going to drain their energy.
Mhm.
Totally drain their, they will not want to do it, right? And that
Mhm.
was one of the things I struggled as a child is my parents always told me, you have to do this, you have to do that. And I would do it, but not from a place of joy. It's because I had to do it, but it drained my energy.
Mhm.
So what I taught my son's teachers is make it your need as a teacher and say, can you help me with this, please? And he'll jump at it. Can you
Mhm.
help me? That's how I talk to him. Can you help me with this? Can you help
Mhm.
me with that? So I create a need that he has to fulfill, but he's actually doing something for himself.
Okay. So, thank you for decoding me. A giver why and a server how. So, how would someone like myself or anyone use this information now to help with self-bullying?
So with self-bullying, one of the most important things is you know that you are giver why and server how. So in self-bullying, how that works is that you know your uniqueness. So you're not going to step into something else that's not you because you have to be good at everything, right? So, for example, I'll give you an example of an exhorter. An exhorter is somebody that encourages other people for the future. Now, because you're a server, how you can be giver, exhorter, where you can encourage other people because you're going to give them an idea for improvement. That's your intention. But you can't change your intention to exhorter why. If you
Mhm.
decide, I'm doing this because I want to encourage this person, you're going to drain your energy. So that's literally when you step outside your uniqueness. The biggest thing is a lot of people say, I need to fit in, right?
Mhm.
Once you understand your uniqueness, you just need to fit in with your uniqueness. I spent 2 years operating as exhorter server where I was trying, my intention was to encourage people. And I just drained myself. I was bullying myself by trying to be something I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And then just to touch a bit on imposter syndrome here too, is that once you know your intrinsic motivators, your intangible drivers, and you build confidence in that, what ends up happening is you don't really experience imposter syndrome because you're not trying to be something you're not. You're just focused on being who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, I got to experience that this week when people that usually coach me came to me with the intention of coaching me, but I realized, hang on, I'm compassion server. So I bear other people's pain so that they grow. I just let them share their pain. I let them share. And then where I needed to ask questions for them to self-reflect, I asked questions. But never at any point did I step into exhort, like encouraging people. I'd say, okay, what's your plan for this? What's your plan for this? How is this going to work out? Okay, I
Mm-hmm.
see you have this. Do you recognize this is what XYZ is? And it's like, having those three people come off that call when they were meant to coach me and me coaching them instead was like, okay, I stepped into my uniqueness. And they like saying, thank you so much. I would say, no, thank you very much because you've helped me step into my uniqueness. And
Mm-hmm.
through grace and faith, I've been able to help you. It wasn't about me. It was me being able to help you. I adjusted to fill a need. And that felt so awesome.
So I think that the audience would really love to know, because you talk about like imposter syndrome. That is probably, I've talked about it on this podcast many times with many folks, and it is the most common thing. Everyone has a little bit of it in some ways. For some people, it's more paralyzing than for others. So let's say you take this test, this flow test test. It gives you, your why and your how. Where do we go from here to discover our uniqueness, to discover more about ourselves, and start helping with things like imposter syndrome and self-bullying?
So, one of the main parts of this test, and I do this in my uniqueness workshop with everybody, is that you have to take a look at your role model adult. Now, your role model adult is not the typical sense of person that you looked up to. It's the adult you saw the most between ages 2 and 8.
Mm.
My mother is server giver. So I had to be able to, what happens is when you look at your role model adult, you look at their behavior and you take on that behavior unconsciously. You're kind of telling yourself unconsciously, okay, this is how I'm supposed to behave. My mom
Mm-hmm.
being giver, she was always giving ideas for improvement, and she's a retired teacher. So there's that, right? And when I was operating, I was always trying to give advice, giving ideas for improvement, but that's not who I am. And I found it exhausting, and it wasn't received well on the other side as well because I'm not a giver, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, energetically, you're able to pick that up. So it was never received very well. So when I stepped back and I said, okay, you know what? As a role model, my mom was great with this, like 5 things that she was really good at. And then you have to write down 5 things where you feel you know, was good for, or I think it was 3 things that was good for them to do according to their uniqueness, but not good for you to do according to your uniqueness. So for her, it was good for her to give advice and ideas as a server giver, but not for me to do it. That's not who I am. Unless someone says specifically, can you give me advice on this? So
Mm-hmm.
what I found is when I slowly started stepping back into and I say stepping back because it's a backward step, stepping back into my uniqueness and then experiencing, holding space for people that are in pain, bearing their pain, right? And filling that need so that they feel better and them getting off the call. I mean, I had this guy say to me yesterday, it's like, we were supposed to talk about what you're doing and what, and I said, no, 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 you're in distress. Well, not really in distress, but you're not feeling good. Let's focus on that because I'm here to help you feel better. And for him to have walked away from that call energized and me to walk away from that call energized was just amazing. When I start giving, that's when it drains my energy. That's imposter syndrome for me, is that I'm stepping into uniqueness that's not mine.
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually, in essence, working against yourself.
Yeah. So it sounds like you really have to understand fundamentally your why and your how. Are you a giver? Are you a server? And all the other categories. And it sounds like, whatever format, like in a workshop and such, really understanding what behaviors you're exhibiting today that might be going against your why and your how. And if it is,
Exactly.
like, you're not a giver, but you're doing all these giving things because it was modeled for you between the ages 2 and 8 with your mom, whoever it might have been. And, realizing this is not natural, right? Um, okay. Okay. Um,
So I just want to mention something super quick. One of the things
yeah.
I do and I offer is, a team building exercise where
Mm,
um, we all go through each one's uniqueness and you leverage other people's uniqueness. You see, this is the beauty of it, is that you don't have to be good at everything. I have a friend, perceiver teacher. So a perceiver, they want to
mm,
make you aware of a fact, and his how is he teaches it. He wants me to understand. So if I'm writing a proposal or something, I send it to him. I say to him, please can you look at this and tell me what I need to see, and what I need to understand. How do I change this? So it takes the pressure off of me of having to figure this out. So if
mm.
we know each individual's uniqueness within a team and we leverage that uniqueness to help us with tasks, it gives them energy to do something in their uniqueness, and it takes the pressure off of us to do something that's not in our uniqueness.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, another big theme of this leadership podcast is leadership. And, one of the key things that, folks have asked me in the past, like, hey, what do you think is what's your superpower, Dave? And I've said, like, I'm able to get folks to get things done. And they're like, oh, what do you do? Like, carrot or stick? I go, no, it depends. And it's not carrot or stick. It's do some, motivate the individual. And I say individual, and this individual could be another leader, could be one of your peers. Motivate them in the way that resonates with them. And, for instance, what doesn't resonate with me, exactly, it was what you said, is, I want you to do this. I'm like, sure, I'll get it done, but I'll do it begrudgingly. Right. And,
Exactly.
and that doesn't work for me. And, I've had bosses in the past where they realize, like, oh, just dropping the hammer like that, actually, it's turns out worse. Right. What does help is, like, hey, have you noticed? And get me to self-reflect, and I'll probably be more critical of myself than anyone else could ever be critical of. And that's where I see the most improvement in myself, when they let me reflect, and I'll be more critical than anyone else could ever be. Right. But then I take action because I want to get better. Right. So, no, fun fact for anyone listening there. Right. That's how you get me to do things. Um, so I guess I do want to pivot for a second. I want to talk a little bit more about Kalyani. You talk about growing up, ages 2 to 8, your big influences and such. So I guess briefly talking about the early years of you and how you became who you are and what led you up to the TED Talk. We'll use that as an anchor point for now. Um, what are some significant events and significant memories you can think of from your early years that shaped who you are?
So it's very interesting you say that. How much time do we have? I'm just joking. No, I'm just joking. I will summarize. So again, talking a little bit about uniqueness, is growing up, I was taught to go against my uniqueness. And what I mean by taught to go against my uniqueness is, my mom would always say to me, don't be so emotional. And that is what people call us. It's a trigger word for us compassionate people. It's just so emotional, right? She would say, don't be so emotional. People will take advantage of you. You're going to get hurt. So I was kind of forced to step outside of my uniqueness. And that made me very miserable. I grew up, and I'm not the typical brown person. I was never a straight A student. So that just went against me in every shape and form, right? It was like, first, I'm sort of how. Secondly, I was not smart. So I was like, you got to do this. You have to sit and study. You have to. And I just drained my energy. And this is what I wish I could teach teachers and kids in schools. How do you energize them in their uniqueness to get done what needs to be done? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, backstory again. And then, just trying to learn and be something I was not, so that the bullying could stop at home. So all of this shaped me. And then I grew up in apartheid South Africa. So for me to get an education that was not based on my skin color, I was sent to another country in a very prestigious boarding school. For a year and a half, I was severely bullied. And it happened between the ages of 12 and 13, and 13, between ages 13 and 14, all children go through a process called synaptic pruning,
Mhm.
where we have tree-like structures in our brains called dendrites, and glial cells retire paths in our brain that are not frequently used. And then if you have a lot of negative trees from bullying and bad words that are said to you, it actually, for lack of a better word, dumbs you down. And that's what
Mhm.
happened with me. So I was already a bad student, and then I became a worse student. I had to end up repeating grade 11. I was really struggling. I became a CPA. I did the career. I had the arranged marriage. I did everything by the book, but I was not happy. And when I say I'm happy in my marriage is because I just got really lucky. Met a great guy. We've grown together. It's been amazing. We've been married 20 years. But when I was unhappy within myself. And then, 13 years ago, I quit my career to raise both my kids. Went through postpartum depression, which is all in my TEDx talk. Um, and then, I started diving into different modalities. I did a lot of meditation, a lot of that. And I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it works more on effect. So I call it steps 3 to 10. It was only literally a year ago that I discovered Flowcess, and I started applying this information in my life. And within this last year, I have made so much growth and progress. I have been invited to speak at a TEDx. I worked with the Calgary military families. I worked with, inclusive leadership in the virtual world. I worked with parents and teens, so I've literally gone out there, and nothing happened in all these years, but it was all taking that step back into my uniqueness and then mastering my thought processes. And then you can add the meditation and everything else. That's steps 3 to 10. But it was the 1 and 2 that really helped me achieve what I wanted to achieve. And I'm still a work in progress. I'm not perfect. I've been very open and honest with you. I've admitted the fact that I need to revisit my multiple award winning book, because there are things that I've learned that don't actually work. And I need to rewrite those parts. And I'm
Mm.
okay admitting that I was wrong, and I can change that. And that's growth, is the ability to admit that you're wrong and to do the repair that goes with it.
Wow. Okay, we should have a little more time there. So, you know, it sounded like your childhood growing up. You didn't fit the mold, right? And you were motivated in the ways that some families know how, is to say you're dumb and thinking that's the way. I mean, in my culture, there was some of that too, right? Comparing you to your relatives, comparing you to friends, and what my best man at my wedding. When I was doing my speech, I said, "Hey, growing up, there was times where I wonder if you were the son and not me, because he was he was a good student, quiet, listened to everyone. I questioned, I would talk back to teachers, and I wasn't the best student at all in that way. And I guess so where are you now then? Like, what's next for Kalyani? Like you're on this growth journey. You you've written this book, which is a wonderful book. It's called what was it called again? It's called
Unbullied.
Unbullied: 14 Techniques to Silence the Critics. You want to rewrite some of that, so some of it works, some of it doesn't, but it's okay. What's next then? What are you trying to achieve next?
So focusing totally on causality, focusing on the cause is what I want to achieve next, is to just keep speaking this truth wherever it's needed, wherever I people are ready to hear it. That's where I'm going to speak it, right? And we spoke just before we started recording, we spoke about being rejected. I was recently rejected by the University of Calgary to teach both self-bullying and uniqueness. And, a lot of people handle rejection very badly. I did handle it badly initially, until I realized, well, rejection is actually redirection to faith and grace. And I had faith, but I didn't have grace. And what I was doing is I was focusing on the effect of landing the opportunity, rather than focusing on the cause, which is sharing the truth, which is the truth of uniqueness, the truth of thought processes.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I am doing a presentation for CPAs next month. Really excited to do that. And then just, wherever I can, keep sharing, just keep sharing this. And as opportunities come, keep applying for them.
Keep sharing.
Yes.
That's wonderful. So if you were to give some advice to, we'll make this into a nice little clip too. What's one piece of advice you would give to young leaders out there?
Okay, so there's a lot I want to say in this, but I'll start with, how people say be who you are, be yourself. First of all, identify who yourself is through your intangible drivers. Secondly, and this is my friend Dottie Reynolds says this, don't quit, pivot. So, and the reason I say this is I wrote this book, it won 3 awards, and it was totally focused on anti-bullying techniques for teenagers to use in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I was even invited by CTV Morning Live, Calgary. I did an interview, everything, but I was never able to get my foot in the door. When I started researching self-bullying and understanding it, and then getting trained by Flowcess by understanding how our brain works, and without getting into the effects and literally focusing on the causes and stopping that, so many doors opened up for me. So I've moved away from the anti-bullying techniques for kids in schools. Unless somebody really wants it, I'll do it, but I'm not pursuing that. Moved it totally to self-bullying and really just focusing in that area and helping people reconnect with who they really are,
Mm-hmm.
and then working on their thought processes. So I didn't quit, I just pivoted. So don't quit, pivot. That's all I'm saying.
Don't quit, pivot.
Yes. And it's
Okay.
okay to pivot, because the advice people have been given over and over is like, you don't know how close you are to achieving your dream. Just don't give up. Don't give up. And you're pushing and pushing and pushing, and it's draining you. Take that backward step.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. There's plenty of advice out there from folks who, you know, it's their own lived experience, but fortunately and unfortunately, they're so famous that their advice becomes gospel. Like, never give up, always keep pushing. You're this much closer. It's like, horses don't really work as well as cars. Like, you can push as hard as you want, but that car is going to dominate you. I mean, today it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. I would say the same about AI. It's like, don't push against it. It's been here already. You push against it, you're still riding the horse and not the automobile. So
Exactly.
that's another podcast. I come from tech, you can tell. Like, I guess so question to you then. One of the last couple questions I want to ask you. One of them is, so knowing what you know now, then knowing what you know about self-bullying, understanding yourself, if you were to go back to that 13-year-old Kalyani, what would you tell yourself?
It's interesting you ask that question. The reason I feel, and that's the thing, is the reason I was bullied is low self-esteem from my bullies, right? And I think even back then, I won't say I was confident in who I was, but I accepted myself for who I was. So if I had to say something, I'll just say, keep being you, keep doing you. And if something doesn't feel right, there's a reason for it. Trust that reason. Even if you have to go against the flow, go against the flow. Be a salmon, swim against the flow. It's all good. It will
Mm-hmm.
work out in the end. But I think what made it really hard for me is I was alone. I was very, very alone. I didn't have support from family. I didn't have friends. So you cannot grow in isolation. You need a community of people to support you in your growth. And because I was in isolation, I think that's what made it very, very hard for me.
So your advice then to yourself:
It
don't
just,
grow in isolation.
no, keep doing you. Just keep being
Keep
you.
doing you.
Yep.
Mm,
You're on the
keep
right
being you.
path. Yep.
Okay. Um, Last question. I always leave it to my guest to ask me any question you want.
Okay. What are you going to change now that you know your uniqueness?
So my why is I'm a giver. One of the things I've learned to be more aware of. Not everyone is ready to receive. So just because I want to give doesn't mean Kalyani wants to receive right now. And so my natural state is to, advise, help others. Like right before this call, I was talking to someone who's trying to start a business, and I was like, hey, look, they're ready to receive. I go, I'm happy to give input into the business idea, blah blah blah. Right. I just got to make sure I read the person and make sure they're ready to receive that advice or that help. And it's something I have to be very conscious of as a giver. So in my younger years, I wasn't.
Okay.
It's called unsolicited advice.
So can I please give you 2 pieces of advice?
Please.
So first of all, knowing your uniqueness, it's important to communicate your uniqueness with those around you. I would highly recommend that your wife also take the uniqueness quiz. I would love to help both of you communicate using each other's uniqueness. I think it'll be so beautiful. It'll help you grow. And secondly, when you're ready to give someone advice, instead of reading them, or definitely read them rather, and then second, take one more step before you say anything. And I was like, do you want advice or do you want me to listen?
Yes. I've done that with specific individuals, that last thing, like, and it's because they actually said it to me, right? Like they understood, like they're much better than me at understanding people, right? I think I'm okay, but this person said to me, is like, Dave, sometimes I just want to talk. I'm not looking for advice. I'm like, understood. So I approached our chats with, do you want some advice here, or do you want a sympathetic ear here, or you want me to just listen? And they were like, I just need you to listen. I need to complain about this.
I love this. Okay, so David, I'm going to finish off with one little more piece of advice. It's very hard for a giver not to give an idea for improvement. So to keep your energy level up, say out loud to yourself, so your unconscious brain is aware of what you're thinking, that I'm giving this person the gift of listening. So you're still giving something.
You're still giving.
You're still giving. I'm giving the gift of listening. And communicate your uniqueness to, giving the gift of listening, and communicate your uniqueness to those near and dear and close around you. Just quick share here is like my son said to me a couple of days ago, like, Mom, this work that you've done for the last year, he calls it my transformation work. He says to me, Mom, it's really good. You've become a much nicer person. I'll take it.
Well, Kalyani, anything else you want to mention to the audience out there?
So I always say, be who you are. And my question is, but do you really know who you are?
And I'll link all the information on how you can start that process about finding about who you are.
Yes.
And it'll be in the show notes. All right, Kalyani, this is wonderful. This is 45 minutes. Flew by. We could do 2 hours easily.
That's what happens when you're in flow. I was in flow and you were in flow too.
We were just in the flow.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Kalyani, this is great. And, I do want you back on this podcast sometime in the future. I think there's a lot more to unpack than what we did today. But we'll go from here, and have a good day, Kalyani.
You as well. I'd love to be back. Thank you so much, David. This was so much fun.
All right. Chat soon.
Yep. Bye.